Hey everyone, before we dive into today's stories, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It'll really help you get more thrilling and spine-chilling stories like this. I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below, and let's see how far our story listeners reach. I've lived in the same neighborhood for almost 8 years. It's the kind of place where you recognize everyone's car, wave to people, even if you don't know their names, and keep mental notes on whose dog is always barking. For the most part, it's quiet. Kids ride bikes, old couples walk in the evenings, and the loudest thing at night is usually someone's AC kicking on. But there's always been that one house at the end of the block. It was already empty when I first moved in. A small, 2-story place with chipped paint, a sagging porch, and curtains that never moved. At first, it was just part of the scenery, a place I barely noticed except when I walked past on my evening runs. But over the years, the longer it sat abandoned, the more it started to stand out. People in the neighborhood had all sorts of theories. Some said the owner had died and the kids never sold it. Others claimed it was tied up in legal trouble. One guy told me it had black mold so bad no one could live there. Whatever the truth was, it sat there untouched, yard overgrown, windows dusty, mailbox permanently empty. For me, it was just another oddity of suburban life, until I started noticing things. It began one winter when I came home from work late. It was close to midnight and the street was quiet. As I drove past that house, I noticed the upstairs window curtain pulled back. Just slightly, like someone was peeking out. I slowed down without meaning to, staring at it. For a moment, I thought I saw a shadow move. Then the curtain dropped back into place. I told myself I was overtired, imagining things. Maybe the wind had caught it. Maybe my headlights created an illusion. Still, it unsettled me enough that I mentioned it to my neighbor Tom the next day. He smirked and said, "You're not the first one. People say they see stuff there all the time. Lights, movement, sometimes even voices. But when anyone goes to check, it's locked up tight." That was the start of me paying closer attention. And the more I looked, the harder it became to ignore. Some nights I'd see faint light flickering inside. Not steady like a lamp, but quick, shifting light, like someone moving with a flashlight. I once passed by early in the morning on my jog and swore I heard something slam shut inside. And sometimes, very late, I'd see the faint glow of a cigarette burning on the porch. By the time I reached for my phone, it would be gone. Most neighbors dismissed it. Some claimed teenagers used it as a hangout. Others said squatters came and went. But something about it didn't feel random. The movements weren't careless like kids messing around. They were calculated, controlled. One night, walking my dog past the place, I felt eyes on me. I glanced up and caught the curtain in the upstairs window shift again. I froze. My dog, usually oblivious, started growling low in his throat. That was enough for me. I yanked him away and didn't look back. From then on, I avoided walking past it after dark. Things escalated about a month later. I came home from work around 7 p.m. It was already dark, the street quiet. As I parked, I noticed movement near the empty house. A figure stepped out of the shadows by the porch and walked across the yard toward the streetlight. He wasn't a teenager. He looked like a grown man, tall and broad, wearing a dark hoodie pulled low. He stopped under the streetlight and lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his face. I only caught the lower half, sharp jaw, unshaven. He didn't look around, didn't seem nervous. He smoked slowly, deliberately, like he belonged there. When he finished, he flicked the butt into the street, turned, and walked back toward the house. Without hesitation, he unlocked the front door and went inside. My stomach tightened. For years, that place was supposed to be locked, abandoned, but he had a key. I sat in my car longer than I should have, staring at that door. Eventually, I forced myself to go inside my own house, but my mind was racing. Who was he? Why was he living in a house everyone thought was empty? That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured him standing at the window, staring out at the neighborhood, watching me. Over the next week, I paid close attention. The man didn't come out much during the day, but late at night I'd see him sitting on the porch, smoking. Sometimes he'd stand in the yard, unmoving, as if surveying the street. One evening, I finally saw him up close. I was walking to my car when he came around the corner. We nearly collided. He froze, so did I. "Evening," I muttered, forcing a casual tone. His eyes locked on mine. They were cold, expressionless. Then, after a long pause, he gave a stiff nod and walked past me toward the house. I stood there, heart pounding, until I heard his door shut. After that, I started noticing other things. A dark sedan I'd never seen before parked near the house at odd hours. Strangers walking up to the porch, going inside, then leaving 20 minutes later. Once I caught muffled voices late at night, sharp, hurried conversations. It didn't feel like someone just squatting. It felt organized. One night, I woke to the sound of shouting. I crept to my window and peered out. A man I didn't recognize was on the porch, yelling at the guy in the hoodie. Their words were muffled, but their tone was angry. It ended quickly. The stranger stormed off, got into the sedan, and sped away. The next morning, I found a smear of dried blood on the sidewalk in front of the house. That was when I realized this wasn't just odd behavior. Something dangerous was happening there. I considered calling the police. But what would I say? That I saw a guy smoking and people coming and going? They'd probably brush it off as squatters or drug activity. So I stayed quiet, watched, waited. Then, one night, it all came to a head. It was close to 2 a.m. I was awake, scrolling on my phone, when I heard a sound, glass breaking. I froze and listened. It came from the direction of the empty house. I crept to my window and peeked out. A different group of men were at the house, 3 of them forcing their way inside. Within minutes, shouting erupted. Then a gunshot. My whole body went cold. I ducked down, heart racing. More shouts followed, then 2 more shots. Seconds later, I saw the men run out, sprinting to their car. Tires screeched and they were gone. The street fell silent. For a long time, I didn't move. Eventually, I forced myself to peek out again. The house looked normal, dark, silent, no sign of anyone. I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, I walked past, pretending to be casual. The porch had a dark stain near the steps. The front door was slightly ajar. That was enough. I finally called the police. When they arrived, they searched the house. What they found confirmed everything I feared. Inside, the place had been converted into a sort of base. There were mattresses on the floor, piles of food wrappers, boxes of unmarked pills, and weapons. In the basement, they found a locked room with chairs, restraints, and bloodstains. But no bodies. No sign of the man in the hoodie. The police said it looked like some kind of organized crime operation. Drugs, maybe trafficking. They didn't give many details, but their faces told me enough. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. Around 3 a.m., I woke up and, against my better judgment, peeked through my blinds toward the empty house. In the upstairs window, the curtain was pulled back, and for the briefest moment, I saw him. The man in the hoodie. He was staring straight at my house. Our neighborhood was the kind of place people moved into for peace of mind. Wide streets, trimmed lawns, neighbors who waved when they saw you. For years, nothing really happened here. That changed the winter a string of break-ins hit our block. It started small. A bike stolen from a yard, a few packages disappearing off porches. But then one night, the Harris family came home to find their back door pried open, their living room ransacked, jewelry and electronics gone. The week after that, the Thompsons got hit too. People started getting nervous. We weren't used to crime here. Suddenly, doors were double locked, motion lights went up, and conversations at the mailbox were filled with worry. Then came the idea of a neighborhood watch. It was Tom's suggestion, same guy who always pushed for block parties and holiday decorations. He stood in front of a group of us one evening, coffee mug in hand, saying, "If the cops can't be everywhere at once, we can at least keep eyes open. We'll do shifts, check the streets at night, make sure no one's lurking around." People liked it. It gave us a sense of control. Within days, a schedule was made. Pairs of neighbors would walk the block for 2-hour shifts, flashlights and cell phones in hand. I didn't love the idea, but I volunteered anyway. It felt wrong not to, like I'd be the weak link if I didn't. My first shift was with a guy named Richard. He lived a few houses down from me, quiet, middle-aged, the type who kept to himself. I didn't know him well, but he seemed normal enough. We started our patrol at 11 p.m., bundled up against the cold. The street was silent, only the sound of our footsteps crunching on the pavement. At first, we made small talk. Jobs, weather, little things. But as we walked past the Harris place, Richard stopped and stared at the house. "They were asking for it," he muttered. I frowned. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "Leaving lights off, no cameras. You make it easy, someone's gonna take advantage." I didn't respond. Something about the way he said it, so flat, so certain, made me uneasy. As the shift went on, Richard barely spoke. He walked ahead of me most of the time, scanning the yards and houses like he was looking for something specific. Once, he stopped in front of the Thompsons' place and just stood there, staring at their windows. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, but didn't move for another full minute. By the time our shift ended, I was glad to go home. I told myself I was overthinking it. Not everyone has the same idea of casual conversation. Maybe he was just intense. But then I started hearing things. During later shifts with other neighbors, people mentioned Richard. One woman said he'd walked straight into someone's yard, claiming he thought he saw movement near a window. Another guy said Richard carried a crowbar on his patrol, just in case. And then there were the burglaries. They didn't stop. In fact, they got worse. But strangely, they only happened on nights when Richard wasn't scheduled to patrol. I brushed it off at first. Coincidences happen, but a part of me couldn't let go of it. One night, I was out walking my dog later than usual, around 1 a.m. As we rounded the corner near the Thompsons' house, I saw movement, a figure slipping out of their side gate. My first thought was burglar. I froze, clutching the leash, heart hammering. Then the figure stepped into the streetlight, and I saw his face. Richard. He was wearing dark clothes, gloves, a hood pulled up. When he saw me, he stopped dead. For a long moment, neither of us moved. My dog barked, breaking the silence. "You shouldn't be out this late," Richard said finally. His voice was calm, too calm. I swallowed hard. "Neither should you." He smiled faintly, just making sure everything's safe. Then he walked off into the darkness, not toward his house, but back in the direction of the so-called abandoned Harris place. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The image of him slipping out of that yard kept replaying in my mind. The next day, I told Tom what I'd seen. He frowned, but didn't look convinced. "That's serious," he said, "but we don't want to accuse anyone without proof. Maybe he really was checking something." I wanted to believe that. But 2 nights later, the Miller's house was hit. Jewelry, cash, gone. And guess who wasn't on patrol that night? I decided to take matters into my own hands. The following week, I signed up for a late shift, knowing Richard was paired with someone else the night before. My plan was simple: keep an eye on him without him realizing. At midnight, I watched from my upstairs window as he left his house. But instead of walking to meet his partner, he cut through the backyards, moving quickly and quietly. I grabbed my jacket, slipped outside, and followed at a distance. He went straight to the empty Harris house. My chest tightened as I saw him pull a key from his pocket and unlock the back door. I waited a few minutes, then crept closer. From the yard, I could see faint light flickering inside. I edged up to the window and peered in. What I saw made my stomach drop. The living room was filled with stolen stuff: TVs, laptops, jewelry boxes, even bikes stacked against the wall. It was like a warehouse for everything that had gone missing from our neighborhood. And Richard was inside, calmly sorting through it. I stumbled back, heart racing. My first instinct was to call the police, but my phone was in my pocket, and as I fumbled for it, the back door creaked open. Richard stepped out. Our eyes met. He didn't look surprised. He didn't even flinch. He just smiled. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. I turned and ran. I didn't stop until I was back inside my own house, door locked, chest heaving. My hands shook as I called the police and told them everything. They arrived within minutes, but when they searched the Harris place, it was empty. No Richard, no stolen goods, just dust and broken furniture. The officers looked at me like I was wasting their time. One even asked if I'd been drinking. For days, I questioned myself. Had I imagined it? Could I have been wrong? But deep down, I knew what I'd seen. And then the break-ins stopped, just like that. Richard disappeared. His house went dark. Mail piled up in his box. No one knew where he'd gone. Some neighbors said he must have moved away. Others claimed he was arrested quietly for something unrelated. When you live in the same neighborhood for over a decade, you get used to the rhythm of it. The faces don't change much. The routines stay the same. You know which house always smells like barbecue on Saturdays, which old guy waters his lawn at 6 a.m., which porch lights flick on exactly at sundown. It becomes a pattern, something safe and predictable. That's why when the house 2 doors down from me sold after sitting empty for almost a year, everyone on the street noticed. It wasn't the kind of place that stayed vacant for long. It was a tidy 2-story with a wraparound porch, the sort of house people dream about. But the previous owners had moved out suddenly, and the for sale sign just lingered there until one day it was gone. The first I saw of the new neighbors was on a Sunday morning. I was drinking coffee on my porch when a U-Haul pulled up. A man stepped out first, tall, in his 30s maybe, with sharp features and short-cropped hair. Then a woman, about the same age, carrying a baby in her arms. They looked like the kind of family you'd see in an ad. Young, attractive, well-dressed even for moving day. I waved. The man waved back, but there was something off about it. Too quick, too practiced, like he knew he was supposed to wave but didn't actually feel like it. Over the next week, they settled in fast. Curtains went up, flower pots appeared on the porch, and every morning, the man left in a sleek black SUV at 7:30 sharp. The woman walked the baby stroller up and down the block in the afternoons, smiling politely, but never stopping to chat. The first time I talked to the man, he introduced himself as Daniel. It was late one evening while I was taking out the trash. He was in his driveway, standing perfectly still, staring up at the sky. When I said hello, he turned quickly, almost startled. "Hey," he said, flashing that same too-perfect smile. "Nice to meet you. We're still unpacking." I asked him where they'd moved from. He hesitated a second too long before saying, "Out of state." Then he excused himself and went inside. It was nothing, I told myself. Some people just aren't chatty. But soon, little things began to pile up. For one, the baby. I never once heard it cry. Not in the day, not in the middle of the night when every other parent I knew was up rocking theirs back to sleep. It was always silent. Then there was the woman. I'd see her walking, always at the same time, same route, same neutral smile. But the stroller cover was always pulled down, completely shielding the baby. I never got a good look. The oddest thing happened one night when I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I glanced out my bedroom window and saw movement at their house. Daniel was unloading something from the back of his SUV. Not boxes, bags. Large, heavy-looking black duffel bags. He carried them inside one after another, glancing up and down the street each time like he was making sure no one was watching. The next morning, I checked the driveway. The SUV was spotless, like nothing had ever been there. I told myself I was being paranoid. People move at odd hours all the time. But then a week later, Mrs. Collins from across the street came to my door. She's in her 70s, the kind of woman who knows everything happening in the neighborhood. "Have you met the new folks?" she asked. Briefly, I said. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Something's not right with them." When I pressed her, she said she'd seen Daniel walking behind her house at midnight. When she called out, he just froze, then walked away without saying a word. "That's not normal," she said, shaking her head. I wanted to laugh it off, but deep down I agreed. Things escalated fast after that. One afternoon, I was outside cleaning my gutters when I noticed the woman pushing the stroller down the street as usual. But the stroller hit a crack in the sidewalk and tipped slightly. I had a clear angle, just for a moment, and what I saw didn't make sense. The stroller wasn't holding a baby. It was filled with blankets. Just blankets, piled neatly, with nothing moving underneath. When she saw me looking, she yanked the stroller upright, adjusted the cover, and kept walking without a word. My stomach turned. That night I kept watch from my window. Around 1 a.m. I saw lights flick on in their garage. I crept outside and stayed in the shadows of my yard. Through the small window of their garage door I saw Daniel. He was unpacking one of those duffel bags. Inside were tools, not normal tools, industrial ones, a blowtorch, chains, bolt cutters, and something that looked horribly like restraints. I stumbled back, heart pounding. The next morning, I told myself I'd call the police. But what would I even say? That my new neighbor carried tools into his garage? That I'd never heard a baby cry? It wasn't enough. Then people started disappearing. First, it was a delivery driver. His van sat idling 2 blocks over, door open, keys still inside, but no sign of him. Then a teenager from the neighborhood never made it home after basketball practice. The neighborhood went into panic mode. Parents kept their kids indoors. Cars cruised by slower. Everyone was on edge. And yet Daniel and his wife went on with their perfect routine. SUV gone at 7:30, walks with the stroller at 3, lights out at 10. Until one night, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I waited until their lights went off. Then I grabbed a flashlight, crept across the yard, and slipped into their backyard. The garage door had a side entrance. It was locked, but the window wasn't latched. I slid it open just enough to peer inside. What I saw nearly made me scream. The garage was lined with shelves, and on those shelves were IDs, wallets, phones, belongings, dozens of them. More than a dozen faces stared back at me from driver's licenses taped neatly to the wall. In the center of the garage was the stroller, empty. The blankets neatly folded on top. And then I heard a voice behind me. "You shouldn't be here." I spun around. Daniel was standing a few feet away, perfectly calm. He held something in his hand, a small black device. "I was hoping you wouldn't be the curious type," he said softly. "Makes things harder." My legs froze. My throat closed up. He stepped closer. "The truth is, we don't belong here. Not in this neighborhood. Not anywhere permanent. We move, we take what we need, and we leave. That's how it works." He raised the device, and I realized it was a taser. Somehow, adrenaline kicked in. I shoved the window open wider and scrambled back through into the yard. He lunged, but I managed to run, sprinting across my lawn, stumbling into my house, slamming the door, and calling 911 with shaking hands. By the time the police arrived, the house was empty, completely empty. Not just the garage, every room. Furniture gone, curtains gone, like no one had ever lived there. Neighbors swore they saw the SUV pull out minutes before the sirens came. The house sat vacant again. Another for sale sign went up. No trace of the perfect family with the baby that never cried. Sometimes at night, I still wake up and swear I hear a stroller's wheels creaking on the sidewalk outside. I've lived in the same neighborhood for most of my life. People move in and out, families grow, houses get repainted, fences get fixed, trees get cut down, but one thing never seemed to change. There was a man who lived 2 streets over, in a house that looked like it hadn't been touched since the 1970s. Faded paint, crooked shutters, a yard overrun with weeds, a single porch light that flickered sometimes but was mostly dead. Everyone knew about him, but nobody really knew him. He was just there, always sitting on his porch when the weather allowed, smoking or staring down the street, never waving, never talking. If you walked by, his eyes followed you, but he didn't say a word. Kids made up stories about him, said he killed his family, said he buried bodies under the floorboards, said the city couldn't evict him because no one wanted to deal with what was inside. I didn't care much for gossip. I had my own life, my own problems. But over time, little things started happening that made it impossible for me not to notice him. It started when I began walking my dog at night. My work schedule shifted, and evenings were the only time I could get out. I'd loop around the neighborhood, sometimes cutting down his street. The first night, I noticed him sitting there in the dark, porch light out, just a glowing tip of a cigarette, his figure barely visible. I nodded, kind of out of habit, and said, "Evening." No response. The second night, same thing. Except this time, when I turned the corner to head back home, I had this strong feeling he was still staring. I glanced back and yeah, his head was turned toward me, even though I was almost a block away. After that, I avoided his street for a while. It wasn't fear exactly, more like unease. But I started noticing things even when I stayed on my block. Windows open at odd hours. Footsteps where there shouldn't have been any. A car door shutting quietly when no car had pulled up. My dog would stiffen sometimes, ears pinned, staring into the shadows. I told myself it was just my imagination, maybe fueled by neighborhood rumors. But then came the night I caught him in front of my house. It was just past midnight. I'd fallen asleep on the couch, TV still on. A sound woke me, the faint crunch of gravel. At first I thought it was a neighbor pulling into their driveway, but then I noticed it was directly outside my window. I peeked through the blinds. He was there, standing in the street, not moving, just standing perfectly still, looking at my house. I froze. My first thought was to grab my phone, but my hands didn't want to move. It was like my body didn't know how to process what I was seeing. After what felt like forever, he turned, slow, deliberate, and walked back in the direction of his own house. The next morning, nothing looked out of place. No footprints, no sign he'd been there at all. I wondered if I'd dreamed it, but my dog barked at the front door for half an hour straight, nose pressed to the crack like he was trying to catch the last trace of a scent. That's when I started keeping watch. For weeks, I paid attention to every sound at night. I noticed patterns. He'd leave his porch after midnight, but no one ever saw him walking. He'd just appear, sometimes down the block, sometimes across the street, always standing still, like he was waiting for something. I tried telling a friend about it, but they brushed it off. Probably just some lonely old guy. Creepy, yeah, but harmless. Except harmless didn't explain the footprints I found in my backyard one morning, or the fact that my back gate was unlatched when I always locked it, or the time I woke up to the sound of my screen door creaking, only to find it wide open. I called the police once, told them about the man, about the way he kept showing up where he shouldn't be. They sent a car around, but by the time the officer got there, the porch was empty. House looked abandoned. The cop gave me a look like I was wasting his time. After that, I stopped calling, but I didn't stop watching. One night, I decided to test something. Instead of turning off my lights before bed, I left them all on. Living room, kitchen, even the porch light. I sat by the window, pretending to be asleep on the couch, but keeping my eyes barely open. At exactly 2:14 a.m., he appeared. Not walking up, not driving. Just there, standing at the end of my driveway, his head tilted up, staring at the light above my door. I felt my chest tighten. Every instinct told me not to move, not to breathe too loud. He stood there for what had to be 15 minutes. Then he stepped closer, one slow step at a time, up the driveway onto my porch. I could hear the boards creak under his weight. He reached out, his hand hovered just inches from my doorknob. I swear I heard him whisper something. Couldn't make out the words, but the sound of his voice was enough to make my blood run cold. Then, just as suddenly, he pulled his hand back and walked away. That was the moment I realized he wasn't just some lonely old man. He was waiting for something. I tried to dig into his past. Asked a neighbor who'd been around longer than me. She just shook her head and said, "That man's been here since I was a kid. Never aged a day." I laughed it off, but the unease stuck. Another neighbor told me his wife and daughter used to live there, but they disappeared decades ago. No police reports, no investigation, just gone. The deeper I dug, the more I hit walls. Records missing. House deed under a different name that hadn't been alive since the 80s. It didn't make sense. The breaking point came 2 months later. I woke up to glass shattering, ran to the kitchen, and found the window over the sink smashed open. On the counter, a cigarette butt. Still warm. I don't smoke. I grabbed my dog, grabbed a flashlight, and tore through the house. Every room was empty, every door locked from the inside. When I checked the backyard, the gate was swinging open again. That's when I knew. He hadn't just been watching, he'd been inside. More than once, and the worst part, I'd never heard him leave. Since that night, I don't sleep much. I keep the lights on, doors bolted, alarms set. Still, sometimes I wake up and feel like I'm not alone. Sometimes I find things move just slightly, enough to notice. I don't know what he wants. I don't know what he's waiting for. But I do know one thing. Every time I walk past his street now, the porch is empty. The house is dark. And yet somehow, I can still feel him watching me. When I moved into this neighborhood, I thought it would be quiet. The kind of place where people wave when you drive by, where kids ride bikes until the streetlights come on, where the loudest noise you'll hear is someone mowing their lawn on a Saturday morning. For a while, it was exactly that. But then I noticed the house across the alley. It wasn't abandoned. I knew that much because sometimes the lights were on. But I never saw anyone go in or out. No cars in the driveway, no mail piling up, no trash cans on pickup day. Just a 2-story house with drawn blinds and a backyard that looked freshly mowed, as if someone cared enough to maintain it, but not enough to live in it. At first, I didn't pay much attention. Everyone's got their quirks. But one night, while taking out my garbage, I thought I saw someone in the upstairs window. A man, just standing there, staring across the alley directly at me. When I blinked, he was gone. Weeks went by, and little things started gnawing at me. A faint humming sound at night, like machinery running behind the walls. A strange chemical odor drifting over the fence when the wind blew the right way. And once, when I let my dog out, she refused to step into the yard. She stood there stiff, tail down, growling low at the house across the alley. I tried asking around. Most neighbors shrugged and said the place had always been like that, quiet, closed off. Someone mentioned it used to belong to a doctor, but he'd passed away years ago. Supposedly, a nephew inherited it, but no one had ever actually seen him. The not knowing started to eat at me. I'm not a nosy person by nature, but when you wake up at 3 a.m. and see a flicker of light through the blinds of a supposedly empty house, it gets under your skin. When you hear doors shutting where there shouldn't be anyone, your brain won't let it go. Then came the night I heard the scream. It was faint, muffled by walls and distance, but it was real. High-pitched, sharp, and cut off too suddenly. I sat up in bed, every hair on my arms standing on end. My first thought was to call the police. My second thought was, what if they don't believe me? What if I just imagined it? I ended up doing nothing that night, but the next day I couldn't shake it. I kept glancing at that house while drinking coffee, while watering my plants, while walking the dog. Everything about it looked the same. Still, I felt like if I stared long enough, I'd see something move behind the curtains. 2 nights later, I got my proof. I had just turned off the lights and was about to head to bed when I heard footsteps in the alley. Not unusual, people cut through sometimes, but these were slow, heavy, dragging steps. I peeked through the blinds and froze. 2 men were carrying something, a large, heavy bag. Struggling with it, they moved toward the back of the house across the alley and disappeared through the gate. I told myself it could have been anything, furniture, equipment, even garbage. But deep down, I knew that bag was too heavy for trash, and the way they kept looking over their shoulders, that wasn't normal. The next day, I tried to forget it, went about my routine, kept busy, but when I took my dog out that night, she pulled hard on the leash, straining toward the alley. I followed her, uneasy, and saw the gate to that backyard wide open. I should have walked away, but curiosity is a dangerous thing. I crept closer, my dog tugging beside me. The smell hit first. Metallic, sharp, impossible to mistake once you've encountered it before. Blood. My stomach turned. I backed away fast, heart hammering, dragging my dog with me. That was the moment I realized something terrible was happening in that house. I couldn't just sit on it anymore. I called the police, gave them the address, told them about the bag, the smell, the scream. They came out, knocked on the door, looked around the perimeter. After 15 minutes, they left. One officer stopped by my house on the way out. He told me politely to stop worrying so much and said the property owner had papers proving he was just doing renovations. Renovations, at 3 in the morning, carrying bags that smelled like death. I didn't buy it. That week was the worst of my life. I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the alley made me jump. One night, I swear I saw shadows moving in that backyard. 3, maybe 4 figures working under floodlights. Another night, I heard the distinct sound of a drill. Not on wood, on metal. I kept thinking about the scream, about what could have been in that bag, about what I might hear next. The final straw came on a Thursday. I woke at 2:30 a.m. to the sound of my dog barking frantically. She never barked at night unless something was wrong. I stumbled to the back window and froze. There was someone in my yard, a man, tall, wearing dark clothes. He wasn't trying to break in. He was standing still, staring at my house. And behind him, across the alley, the upstairs window was glowing faint blue. I could see silhouettes moving inside. That's when it clicked. They knew I'd seen too much. I didn't wait to find out what would happen next. I grabbed my dog, keys, phone, and ran straight to my car. I didn't even stop to put on shoes. I drove to a friend's house 2 neighborhoods over and stayed the night. When I came back in the morning, my back gate was wide open. My shed door was ajar, and in the middle of my yard, a cigarette butt was still smoldering. I don't know what's really happening in that house. I've thought about trying to expose it, but I can't shake the feeling I'm already marked. That night I left, I felt eyes on me the whole way down the street. Now I keep my curtains drawn and lights on. I don't walk my dog near the alley anymore. But every so often when I wake up in the dead of night, I swear I hear faint humming drifting through the dark, like machines running, like work being done. And sometimes I hear something worse, a muffled scream, quickly silenced. I never paid much attention to the house at the far end of our street. It wasn't run down exactly, but it looked tired, paint faded, gutters sagging, grass cut just enough to keep the city from complaining. Nobody seemed to go in or out. Once in a while, a black car would pull into the driveway for a few minutes, then leave again. No one got out. No one carried groceries inside. It was just there, part of the background, like a picture that never changes. I first noticed something odd about it one summer night when I couldn't sleep. It was around 2 a.m, and I was sitting by my window drinking a glass of water, staring out at the street. The neighborhood was dead quiet. Then I saw a flicker of movement near that house. A man stepped out of the shadows and walked to the front door. No lights came on, but the door opened for him, just a crack, and then closed again. The whole thing took less than 10 seconds. No headlights, no engine noise, nothing. Just a figure slipping into a house that was supposed to be empty. From then on, I started noticing little things. The blinds never moved during the day, but sometimes at night a faint glow would show behind them. A few times I could have sworn I heard faint music drifting through the air when I walked past with my dog. Once, I even caught the smell of cigarette smoke, fresh and sharp, though no one was on the porch. I told myself it wasn't my business. People live their lives how they want. But the unease grew when small things started happening closer to me. My trash can got tipped over 3 times in a single week, always on nights when I heard something faint from that direction. Packages left on my porch disappeared. My dog barked at nothing in the middle of the night, nose pressed to the front door, hackles raised. The breaking point came one night when I was taking the dog out back. She froze at the gate, growling low. I followed her gaze and saw a figure standing in the alley between the 2 yards, not moving, not speaking, just standing there. I called out, asked if he needed something. No answer. He turned slowly and walked toward the end of the alley, disappearing into the dark. My dog wouldn't stop growling for a long time after. I couldn't shake it. The next day, I casually asked a neighbor about the house. She gave me a weird look and said, "What house?" I pointed it out. "That one, down at the end." She frowned like she was thinking hard and then said, "Oh, that's been empty for years. Nobody lives there." I reminded her about the car I'd seen, the man who slipped inside. She shrugged. "You must have imagined it. The city should have boarded it up a long time ago." But I hadn't imagined it. That night, I sat by my window again. Around midnight, a light came on in one of the upstairs rooms, dim, yellow, like a lamp with a dying bulb. I watched for nearly an hour before it went out again. From then on, it became a kind of obsession. Every night, I'd find myself watching the house. Sometimes nothing happened. Other times, I caught glimpses of figures moving behind the curtains. Once, I thought I heard a woman crying faintly, though the sound stopped the second I stepped outside. Another time, a door slammed so hard it echoed down the block, but when I looked, every window was dark. I tried to convince myself I was overthinking it, but then things escalated. One evening after work, I came home to find my back gate unlatched. I always locked it. Inside the yard, the soil around my garden looked freshly disturbed, like someone had dug small holes and filled them back in. My first thought was raccoons, but the holes were too neat, too deliberate. A few nights later, I woke to the sound of footsteps on my porch. Heavy, slow, like someone was trying not to be heard. I grabbed a flashlight, heart pounding, and swung the beam through the window. Nobody was there. But when I opened the door in the morning, I found a single cigarette butt on the top step, still smelling of smoke. I couldn't take it anymore. I called the police and told them someone was trespassing, maybe squatting in the house down the street. They sent an officer who knocked on the door. Nobody answered. He walked around, shined his flashlight, then came back to tell me the place looked abandoned. He said there was no sign of forced entry, no sign anyone was living there. Probably just kids messing around, he said. That night I watched again, and at 3 a.m. I saw a man in a black jacket step out of the house, cross the street, and walk straight past my window. He didn't look at me, didn't say a word, but I knew he saw me. I sat frozen until he disappeared around the corner. After that, I started sleeping less. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like someone moving inside. Every shadow outside my blinds felt like a figure watching. My dog paced constantly, ears perked, growling at unseen things. Then one night, everything came to a head. I was lying in bed, half asleep, when I heard it, a low hum, like machinery coming from the direction of the house. I sat up, listening hard. The hum grew louder, steadier, until I could feel it vibrating in my chest. My dog started barking like crazy. I pulled on my jacket and went to the back window. That's when I saw them, not one man but three, moving quickly across the yard, carrying something large between them. It looked heavy, like a rolled-up carpet. They pushed through the back gate of the house and disappeared inside. A few seconds later, the hum stopped and the neighborhood was silent again. I stood there shaking, knowing exactly what I'd seen but not daring to call anyone. Who would believe me after the police already dismissed it? And what if they found out I was watching? The next morning, I walked past the house in daylight. Everything looked normal. But on the curb in front were three large black garbage bags. They weren't tied tight, and one had a tear near the top. As I passed, I caught the smell. That sharp, metallic stench I'll never forget. I didn't look inside. I couldn't. That night I didn't watch. I closed every curtain, locked every door, and sat with my dog pressed against my side. But I still couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there, standing in the dark, waiting. It's been months now. The house is still there, blinds drawn, silent by day. Sometimes at night I hear faint noises, a door slamming, footsteps, a hum that rises and fades. I try to ignore it. I try to live my life. I used to think my neighborhood was the kind of place where nothing really happened. Kids played basketball in driveways, parents waved at each other while mowing lawns, and the loudest thing at night was the hum of air conditioners. Safe, boring, predictable. That's what I liked about it. After working long shifts at the warehouse, I didn't want excitement. I wanted normal. I wanted quiet. Then the man moved in across the street. The house had been empty for almost a year after the previous owners retired to Florida. It was a 2-story brick place with a sagging porch and peeling shutters, but it had good bones. One morning, I woke up to the sound of a moving truck beeping as it backed into the driveway. By the time I poured my first cup of coffee, I could see boxes being carried in by a crew. I leaned on the counter watching. New neighbors always stirred some curiosity. At first, nothing seemed out of place. The man was maybe mid-40s, average build, dark hair. He wore plain jeans, a gray hoodie, and sunglasses, even though it was cloudy. He didn't wave at anyone, didn't make small talk, just directed the movers with short gestures. I figured he was shy, maybe private. Not everyone wants to be chatty when they're unpacking their life. But then little things. For one, I never saw him shop. No groceries, no takeout bags, no deliveries. Yet he lived there, night after night. The curtains stayed drawn all the time, even during the day. Sometimes I'd glance out my window and catch him standing behind them, just a silhouette. Once, I swear I saw the faint glow of binocular lenses reflecting streetlight. A week in, I saw him dragging something heavy across his lawn late at night. It was wrapped in a blue tarp, long and bulky, like the shape of a body. My stomach tightened, but I told myself it was probably furniture. Still, the way he paused every few steps to look over his shoulder sent chills crawling up my back. After that, I couldn't help watching him more closely. He never seemed to leave the house in daylight. At night, though, he'd come out. Sometimes he'd stand in the middle of his driveway, staring at the sky. Other times he'd walk slowly down the block, never making eye contact, never speaking, just pacing with his hands in his hoodie pocket. The whole neighborhood had started whispering about him. Kids dared each other to run up to his porch and knock. Nobody ever did. Things escalated for me one Thursday night. I'd fallen asleep on the couch with the TV still on. Around 2 a.m, a sound woke me up, a faint tapping. At first I thought it was part of the show playing in the background. Then I realized it was coming from my front window. I froze, heart hammering. Slowly I turned my head. Through the blinds I saw him, the man across the street, standing inches from the glass, tapping lightly with his finger, his face almost pressed against the pane. I shot up, fumbling for the phone. By the time I reached the door, he was gone. I called the police anyway, my voice shaking as I told them a stranger had been at my window. An officer came, took a look around, and found nothing. No footprints, no signs of forced entry. He told me maybe I'd been dreaming, but I hadn't. I know what I saw. After that, I couldn't relax. I installed cameras around my house front and back. For a few nights, nothing happened. Then one morning, reviewing the footage, I saw him again. At 3:14 a.m., he walked across my lawn, slow and deliberate, and stopped at my front steps. He stood there for exactly 6 minutes before turning and walking back to his own house. He never knocked, never tried the door. Just stood there, facing my house, motionless. I showed the footage to the police, but they said unless he trespassed or threatened me directly, there wasn't much they could do. Maybe he's eccentric, the officer said with a shrug. Some people just act strange. That didn't comfort me, especially not when things inside my house started feeling off. One night, I came home from work and found the back door unlocked. I never left it unlocked. Another night, I noticed a picture frame tilted on the mantel. Subtle things, small enough to make me question myself. But the worst was the smell, a faint cologne, musky and sharp, that lingered in my living room some mornings, even though I never wore anything like it. I told myself I was imagining it. Stress, paranoia. Until one night, I woke up to the sound of breathing. Not mine, not the dog's. Slow, steady, coming from the corner of the bedroom. I sat up, heart racing, and flipped on the light. Nobody was there, but the closet door stood cracked open when I knew I had shut it. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. From then on, I lived in constant tension. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of shadow made me jump. The cameras caught him more and more often, standing at the edge of my yard, sitting in his driveway watching my house, even crouched behind a tree across the street, staring. I tried talking to other neighbors, but they just brushed it off. "He's weird, yeah?" One woman said, "but harmless. Just keep your doors locked." Easy for her to say. He wasn't standing at her window. The final straw came one stormy night. Lightning flashed, and for a split second, I saw him standing at the end of my hallway. Inside my house, I screamed and lunged for the light switch, but when the bulb flickered on, the hallway was empty. I tore through the house, checking every room, every closet. Nothing. No sign of forced entry. No wet footprints. Nothing but the lingering smell of that same cologne. I called the police again, desperate, panicked. When they arrived, I told them he'd been inside. They searched the place top to bottom and found nothing. One of the officers gave me a long look and said, "You sure you're not under a lot of stress?" Like I'd imagined the whole thing. But I know what I saw. Now I live in fear every night. I barely sleep. My dog growls at shadows. My cameras catch glimpses of movement I can't explain. And sometimes when I'm drifting off, I swear I hear that faint tapping again on the window, just gentle enough to almost be a dream. But I don't go to the glass anymore. I don't want to see his face there, inches from mine, waiting. Because I know the man across the street isn't just watching me. He's waiting for the moment I finally let my guard down. And I'm not sure how much longer I can hold out. When I first moved into this neighborhood, I thought I had finally found peace. The house was old but solid, the street quiet, the kind of place where people still waved when they passed each other. I wanted calm, something stable after years of moving around. My neighbors seemed friendly enough, families, retirees, the usual mix. Everyone except the man next door. His house sat just a few feet from mine, separated by a narrow driveway. The place looked neglected, like it hadn't been cared for in years. The blinds were always shut, the lawn overgrown. When I did catch sight of him, it was usually at night. He was tall, pale, with greasy hair pulled back in a ponytail. He never said hello, never smiled, just watched me with those flat eyes. The first few weeks, I didn't think much of it. Some people keep to themselves. But then I started noticing odd things. Loud thuds from his basement late at night. Not the sound of dropping boxes. These were rhythmic, like hammering. Sometimes faint cries floated through the wall we shared. At first, I convinced myself it was my imagination. Houses creak, pipes groan. But these sounds, they were different. One evening, while taking out the trash, I saw him dragging a large black bag down his steps. He paused when he saw me, his face blank, his grip tightening on the bag. I forced a smile, muttered something about the weather, and hurried back inside. That night, I sat awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening. The hammering returned, sharper now, followed by what sounded like muffled sobs. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next morning, I mentioned it casually to another neighbor, an older woman across the street. Her smile faltered and she lowered her voice. "Don't get involved," she whispered. "We all hear things. We just let it be." Then she shut her door. That should have been enough to make me back off, but curiosity gnawed at me. I started paying closer attention. From my upstairs window, I had a clear view into the crack of light that sometimes appeared when his basement door opened. Once, I saw him carry down a tray with food. Another time, I glimpsed movement inside, something shifting, quick, before the door slammed shut. The turning point came one rainy night. I was closing my blinds when I saw a face in his basement window. Not his, someone else's. A pale, terrified face pressed against the glass, mouth opening and closing silently before being yanked away into the dark. My heart stopped. I grabbed my phone and called the police, my words stumbling over each other. They came, knocked on his door, spoke to him briefly, and then left. I watched from my window, stunned. When I asked the officer later what had happened, he shrugged. He said it was his girlfriend. They were arguing, nothing criminal. Then he gave me a look like I was wasting their time, but I knew what I'd seen. After that, I couldn't rest. Every night I sat in the dark watching his house. The noises continued, chains rattling, muffled screams, heavy dragging across the floor. I started recording audio, but whenever I played it back, the sound seemed too faint, too distorted to prove anything. It was like the house itself swallowed evidence. One night, around 3 a.m, I saw him leave. First time I'd ever seen him go anywhere. He got into an old van, its headlights off until he was halfway down the block. My pulse raced. This was my chance. I threw on a jacket, grabbed a flashlight, and slipped into his backyard. The basement door was locked, but the small window near the ground wasn't. I pried it open, my hands shaking, and crawled through. The smell hit me first. Stale air, sweat, something metallic and sour. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, landing on a cot against the wall. Shackles bolted to the floor, a stained mattress, and in the corner a girl. Thin, filthy, her eyes wide when the light hit her. She flinched back, shielding her face. "It's okay," I whispered, voice trembling. "I'm here to help." She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. That's when I heard it, the rumble of an engine outside. He was back. My blood ran cold. I scrambled toward the window, whispering for her to stay quiet, promising I'd come back. But she grabbed my arm with surprising strength, her nails digging in. Her lips formed a single word, "Please." Before I could respond, the basement door creaked open above us. Heavy footsteps descended. I yanked free and dove for the window, pulling myself out just as his flashlight beam swept the room. I didn't stop running until I was inside my own house, heart slamming against my ribs. The next day, I tried to report it again, but the police dismissed me. No forced entry, no proof, just my word against his. I even considered showing them my scraped hands, my torn jacket, but I knew it wouldn't matter. They'd already decided I was imagining things. After that, everything changed. I could feel him watching me more openly now, standing in his driveway at odd hours, staring straight at my windows. Once I found muddy footprints leading up to my back door. Another time, my lock felt loose like it had been tested, and then the noises stopped. No hammering, no cries, silence. At first I thought maybe he'd moved her, or worse, but then one night I heard something faint. A whisper, almost too soft to catch, drifting through the wall. My name. I don't know how she knew it. I never told her. Now I barely sleep. I keep the lights on, the doors locked, the cameras running, but deep down I know it's only a matter of time before he makes a move, either to shut me up or to make sure I join whoever he's keeping in that basement. And the worst part? Sometimes I wonder if the girl is still alive at all, or if what I'm hearing now is something else, something that will never leave that house, no matter what happens to me. When I first noticed the van, it didn't seem like anything out of the ordinary. People park on the street all the time, sometimes for days. But this van, it was different. Old white with rust crawling up its sides like veins, no plates on the front, windows tinted black, too dark to see inside. It sat at the corner of our block, angled just enough to give it a view down the street. At first, I assumed it belonged to someone visiting, maybe a contractor working nearby. But weeks went by and it never moved, not an inch. Every time I walked past it, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The air around it felt wrong, heavy somehow, like standing too close to a live wire. During the day, it was unsettling. At night, it was unbearable. I'd pull into my driveway after work, headlights sweeping across it, and swear I saw something shift inside. I wasn't the only one who noticed. Neighbors muttered about it at mailboxes, shook their heads when walking dogs. Someone should report it, they'd say, but no one ever did. People don't like to get involved. One night, around midnight, I sat by my upstairs window, lights off, staring at it. I told myself I was being paranoid, but then the driver's side door opened. Slowly. A figure stepped out, tall and thin, moving strangely, like every joint in his body resisted motion. He didn't walk toward any house. He just stood there, staring at the row of homes. My home. After a long moment, he slipped back inside and the van door shut without a sound. The next morning, I called the police. They sent an officer, who knocked on the van's side and shined a light inside. After a minute, he shrugged and left. Later, I asked him what he saw. Empty, he said. Probably abandoned. But I didn't believe that. I'd seen the man. I started changing my routine, double-checking locks, keeping curtains drawn. Sometimes, when I couldn't sleep, I'd creep downstairs and peek out. The van never left. Sometimes I thought I saw the faintest glow of a cigarette burning inside. Other times the window would crack open slightly, like someone was listening. Then small things started happening. The lid of my trash can left open, though I always shut it tight. Footprints in the dirt by my side gate. Once I found a glove, black leather, on my porch. I knew deep down it was connected to the van. Finally, one Friday night, after too many drinks, I snapped. I grabbed a flashlight and marched down the street. My hands were shaking, but I told myself I was going to prove it wasn't abandoned, that someone was in there. When I reached it, the smell hit me. Rot, faint but sharp enough to sting my nose. I circled around, beam of light bouncing off the rust. The rear doors had scratches around the lock like they'd been opened and slammed shut too many times. I put my hand against the cold metal, steadying myself. And then something inside knocked back, not loud, just a single dull thump. I stumbled backward, heart hammering. The van stayed silent after that, the windows black and unyielding. I ran home, locked every door, and sat awake until the sun came up. The next day, the van was still there. But now something was different. A smear on the inside of the glass. Handprints, faint, like someone pressed against it from within. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I bought a cheap camera and set it up in my window, aimed directly at the van. I let it run for days, reviewing the footage every morning. At first, nothing. Just a still image of the van under the streetlight. But then on the fourth night, I saw it. At 2:13 a.m., the back doors opened slightly. A hand emerged, thin, pale, trembling. It stayed there, gripping the edge of the door for several minutes before being yanked back inside. The doors slammed shut. I felt sick watching it. I brought the footage to the police, but they barely looked at it. Could be old, one officer said. Could be a trick of light. They promised to keep an eye on it, but I could tell they didn't care. After that, the man inside the van, or whatever he was, started targeting me more directly. Every time I walked past, I felt eyes on me. Once I swore I heard my name whispered from inside, faint but clear. Then one night, I woke up to the sound of my front door handle rattling. I froze in bed, barely breathing. After what felt like hours, it stopped. In the morning, I found a long scratch etched into the wood. The van still sat at the corner, silent, watching. Days blurred into each other. I barely slept. Every noise set me on edge. I stopped inviting friends over, stopped answering calls. My world shrank to the distance between my house and that van. Then came the night I'll never forget. I woke to silence. Too much silence. Usually, I could hear the hum of traffic in the distance, a dog barking something. But that night, nothing. I crept to my window and my stomach dropped. The van wasn't at the corner anymore. It was in front of my house. I stumbled backward, heart racing, struggling to breathe. The engine wasn't running, but I knew someone was inside, watching, waiting. I didn't sleep at all. I sat in the dark, clutching a kitchen knife, eyes fixed on the front door. Around dawn, I finally peeked outside. The van was gone. I thought maybe it was over, but the following night it was back at the corner, and that's where it stayed. Still, silent, patient. I don't know how long it's been now, months maybe, but I've stopped trying to fight it. The police won't help, the neighbors pretend not to see, and I'm too afraid to leave. Sometimes I wonder if the van was never really empty at all. If it's been waiting for me this whole time, testing me, wearing me down until I finally open my door at the wrong moment. Because deep down I know one night soon, it won't just be parked outside. It'll be in my driveway again. And when that happens, I don't think I'll survive what's inside.